Well, it is awesome to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. I tell you what, every time I see you, Mike, you make me feel as pale as I am. You coming in from Arizona, me coming in from Canada, you can really see it in our complexions today, I will say.
Okay, well, I think it might also be the air up there at that elevation. Like
Well,
when we met at B2B Marketing Exchange, I gained a greater appreciation for how tall you really are.
yeah, I get that every time I go to one of these events. People are like, "Yo, you're well tall." I'm like, "Do I not look it? I don't know. I don't really know how to ever what to say to that one." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I am." But yeah, elevation up high. You'd imagine that'll get you closer to the sun so you could develop a tan. But like I said, Canada, I'd go outside. It's -6 today, so not happening.
-6. What is that like?
Darn it, Americans. Mike, come on, mate. You're killing
Oh,
me here.
you actually gave me
-6.
-6 centigrade too, not -6 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what a Fahrenheit is. I've never used that. So
All right. So wow, we could go really deep on the weather here. So
isn't
typically what ends up happening when I meet people too in person the first time is they're like, "Do you work out, bro?" And it's just it's this thing where I've got my own complex around it. Body dysmorphia, all of that other kind of stuff. So when you hear those things, sometimes they people want to say it as a compliment, and the other side, the in the internal monologue that goes through my head is like, fuck, am I being judged about what I'm doing in the gym? All of that other kind of stuff. So there we go. I've gone into therapy mode with you, Will.
I
Thank
think
you for letting me
I
open up.
mean it's a good point though in general. Like just if you're trying to build rapport with anyone in life, then probably commenting on their bodily appearance is not the first step you should take. Because you never know what's going on behind someone's head as well, right? Like people say I'm tall, but you wouldn't walk up to someone and say, "Hey, you're short," right? I'd hope not anyway. If you so I think there's better things to build rapport over than me being some kind of freakish giant.
And
But it
it's
also like you can get into territories where you just don't know there's insecurities there. Obviously, I'm not that insecure about being tall, but if you said something about my ears, oh boy, I'd be devastated. I'd be thinking about it for weeks.
That is awesome. So the thing that I would go to is content. Like, well, it would be this whole discussion first, like from a rapport building standpoint. If we've not met before and
Mhm.
meet for the first time, didn't know each other, maybe I walk up to you at an event. The first thing I would say is, and I absolutely love your content and how it's kind of evolved over a period of time from I don't know if you call it sketch, but like the skit type things where you're representing every functional role inside an organization by putting on a different t-shirt or a different pair of glasses or saying a couple of words to the more produced stuff that you're doing now with with the great lighting and very targeted around how to conduct outreach or how to engage with others or what things to avoid when communicating clearly. So I would go the content route with you. Do people typically do that? Are they aware of all your content?
Yeah. So when I go to an event, I was in Tampa I arrived late, but I arrived on Thursday, and I got on that. There was like a boat party thing. It was like
Yeah.
a yacht, and yeah, a lot of people do. It's hard for me to walk from at those very specific industry events. Very hard for me to walk from one side of the room to the other just without getting stopped by someone, which is nice. I won't lie. It does feel good. It can also be like a bit overwhelming. Although I act very chatty and out there, and if you look at my content, you'd never think so. I have some degree of social anxiety as well. So I do after a certain period of time, just want to be like I just want to sit with people that I know and who I have good chats with and just get into it, and so it can have pros and cons, but mostly it does help me feel good.
What type of conversations do you really enjoy having?
I enjoy having conversations with people where I'm having a laugh. I'm a very banter driven person, I guess is the word I can say to that. So I just enjoy people who are funny and are throwing jokes around and just having a good time in a positive way. Although sometimes banter comes in the form of making fun of someone, it's in a way that's taken in good jest and everyone's having a good time with it. So yeah, that's probably the best kind of conversation for me.
So let's get into this kind of you don't take yourself too seriously or like the self-deprecating type stuff. Every once in a while I say stuff like, "Hey, I graduated Arizona State University with a 2.0." And Jen cringes. She's like, why do you say that stuff out loud? And part of it is because I'm just a regular human beings. So where does the appreciation for self-deprecation and humor come from on your side?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. Not sure if it's a British thing, but my family are all just very good at making fun of themselves. I think it's easy if you can make fun of yourself and be a little bit self-depreciation, then you break down barriers that no one likes the person who takes himself too seriously, I don't think. And you can't really offend anyone by being mean about yourself sometimes, you know? When you're about the joke, it's like it's very hard to upset someone. You know, some people worry, like, are you okay? Like, are you upset with yourself? I'm like, no, 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 I'm just joking around, right? But for the most part, it's just like it's an easy way to point the finger and still make a joke without being at anyone else's expense, I find. Even I'll take it a step further. You can make a joke about a group of people that you're part of as well, right? So like when I used to work as a software account executive during my demo, I would make a joke about salespeople, and that often made it all a little bit smoother. Once you got a laugh out of someone, then you get that it like breaks down a wall. It's no longer like, oh, I'm having a demo with a seller's trying to sell me and a prospect who I'm trying to get to buy. It's like, oh, we're just having a good time here. We're having a conversation, and a joke can get you there quicker. I find. Don't want to do every time. You got to read the room, but yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when people smile.
that's it.
The so when it comes to creating content and building, and you've had an opportunity and have had a lot of success building content across multiple brands and drawing attention into multiple brands. What's the biggest mistake people make when first starting out this journey of, so you want to be a content creator?
Yeah. That's a good question, Mike. I actually just had a conversation about this with someone who I was coaching through how I approach content. And I think the biggest consistency is a lot of overthinking before doing. Do I believe you should just jump in and do things and just completely raw dog it? No. I think but I do think there's a point where you need to stop thinking about it and just start doing because that's where the learning is going to really start to kick in. Give you something to reflect on, and then only once you have something to reflect on do you know how you can improve, right? So a lot of people when they say I want to start making content, I say, what would you be your first step? And I'm like, okay, I don't need to go create right away. What I want you to do is go and find someone who's doing this well, someone who's already done this. Because if you were to go and play, let's say, basketball, right? And you were like, I want to be in the NBA, but you weren't ever like taking a moment to watch a basketball game, then you would be probably not very good, right? You want to be watching the players, how they're bouncing the ball, how they're moving around the court, when they decide to pass, where they shoot from, right? And that would then inform your basketball strategy and techniques that you plan on using. Same way, I think content you can do that, but only to a certain extent. Eventually, you just have to start going and knowing that when you start, it's probably not going to be that good. No one's probably going to pay attention, and you probably shouldn't care that much about it because people put stuff out there and they're like, "Oh, well, it's only getting 5 likes." I'm like, "Yeah, but that doesn't hurt you in any way. As long as the information is not mean or attacking anyone or negative in any way, then all you're doing is getting better at making content and putting it out there." Like my first content didn't get much engagement. That's all right. That happened, right? At the time, I thought it was a big deal. I was like, imposter syndrome was going through the roof. I was like, oh, I must have said something that wasn't right, or that. But that was just one of the steps I had to take to get good. And I think that's a thing. So my advice to someone who was starting to create content would be go and consume, go and look at people who are doing it like you, find some role models, and then do and continue to consume while you're doing and reflect on what you've done and figure out how you can improve from there.
What's that reflection process look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to reflect on negative stuff than is positive stuff sometimes when you self-coach. But for me, it's like, okay, that didn't do well. Why didn't it do well? Have other people's same approach work better? What did they do differently to me? What breaking down what didn't work, but then even more importantly, so is like doubling down on success. I used this all the time in sales as well. I'd review my own calls, and all I'd have is negative notes of things I could have done better. Manager would be like, dude, you crushed that part. Like, do more of that. That's also something you think about while you're doing it. So being too self-critical can be damaging as well because doubling down on the stuff that you're good at is way easier than fixing the stuff that you're not so great at. You know what I mean? I think that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know what you're good at until you actually go out there and start doing some of it. You might realize you're actually really good at something that you never thought you were very good at. Fair?
Absolutely. Yes. You don't know until you try.
What's the how long do you give things typically? Like when you're trying something and you're saying, hey, you know what, maybe this thing feels good. It's just not hitting. I'm like, what's that process look like for you? How long do you give things before you maybe quit or pivot? How do you think about that?
I'm very good at doing lots of small things, almost like putting out a bunch of feelers and then seeing if I get a bite. And when I get a bite, that's where I reel it in, and then I do that same bite again, right? So for me, it's I think a lot of experimentation rather than going in like a plan of consistency, especially of content, because like it's online and everything's all samey. So if you can try and do things that are different, that's normally how I go about it. The other answer to that is I'll stop doing something when I don't enjoy it as well,
Mm.
because one thing that people overestimate is really creating content or doing anything in life can be as a full-time or even a part-time thing. If it's not filling your cup, it's going to make your life negative. Yeah, it's going to have a negative impact on your life. So the moment you're not having fun doing something, that one will probably mean that you need to do something else. But two, it's just like it's going to have impact other places in your life as well. So when I've said yes to things and then I regret them afterwards, that's a good indicator of I probably won't want to do this ever again. So yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay to regret those
It's
things
okay.
or feel bad about it or know, hey, you know what? No matter how much people think going to baseball games is amazing, it's not my thing. I'm more into watching ice hockey. Like what like
Yeah.
but you don't know until you're there and you're in that experience or even playing the game like playing golf. There are some people who just do not like that game. I'm not a person who goes and who likes fishing. There are a lot of people who really like fishing.
Yeah.
You know when you go out there and do it, and it's okay to stop. It's okay to say no. Give yourself the freedom to stop.
Yeah, that's such a good point as well. And I think people don't realize this applies to work as well sometimes. Maybe not your job, because you can't just jump around jobs trying to fit, well, maybe you can. A lot of salespeople did that. But maybe the way you're doing that job needs to change as well. And it's so obvious if I said, hey, why do you keep going fishing if you hate it? You'd be like, I don't know, I'm not going to do it anymore, right? But when I say anything related to work, they're like, well, I'm getting paid for it, so I have to do it. And that I think is a place of it's not a place of where you can really thrive in any role, creative, sales. You gotta find some fulfillment in there eventually.
What's
I'm gonna let my dog
creativity?
out 1 second. She's being a butt. I'm sorry, this will be in.
Yeah.
Why were you cuddling me, weren't you? All right, back at it. Covered in dog hair.
What's creativity mean to you?
It's a really good question because people always tell me I'm creative, and I don't think I am. I create, but I'm not creative per se. Like if you ask me to design something or draw something or make something look pretty, I wouldn't really be able to do that. If you told me to come up with an idea on the spot, I might not be able to do that either. I think to me, the way I've remained creative and been able to keep coming up with ideas for content is what I mentioned earlier, just a bit of consumption, right? It's being intentional about how you go through life in a way that's going to inspire ideas. So, for example, I journal a lot, and in that journal are just these ideas that just come to me, and I have to write them down right there and then. But because I'm journaling, because I'm writing them down, I'm noticing them a lot more than someone who is unconsciously consuming or going through life not looking for ideas. So in my mind, if I had to define creative, if people say I am creative and that is true, then it is just being inspired or looking for inspiration a lot, maybe always. So yeah.
How do you differentiate between being inspired by other people's creative work versus plagiarizing other people's creative work?
I think it's that's a good question to start.
Oh, you've said that's a good question 3 times. And typically, when people say that's a good question, it
It's because I
usually
haven't been
means it's a
asked before.
shit question. And this
No,
is
it,
just
it means I haven't
creating
been asked
space.
before, and therefore I don't have an answer ready for you, Mike. Because I come
Yeah.
on a lot of podcasts and people ask me the same questions over and over again.
This
So
is not that podcast.
okay, so I think there's degrees of this, right? Me going ahead and watching a Mr. Beast video and seeing a cut that he did in the editing process that made the video more engaging, and then using that in my own content. I wouldn't say that's plagiarizing. That is just learning from someone who's doing it good, right?
Yes.
if I was to go ahead, watch a Mr. Beast video, and then go ahead and do the exact same video as he did, or a if I took a lot of things from that, or I took not just the techniques that we used in the editing process, but also the ideas, the delivery, the tone. One, I'd be definitely plagiarizing that point, but two, I wouldn't be being myself, and therefore the content would probably be a bit rubbish to me, honestly, when you're trying to be something you're not. Um, so I think it's the intent of what you're trying to do when you do it. There's a really interesting idea that there's not that many original ideas, and we're kind of just going through the same things over and over again. And you probably see this a lot as well, Mike. You work in the sales space. A lot of the advice out there, it stems from a very similar place of like the classic original like solution selling that was really formalized in like the 70s, all right? But the likes of Zig Ziglar and Blumen Sandler and all that. But there's iterations of that as well. So it's figuring out how much of yourself are you adding to something that you may have seen or been inspired by. And if you're not adding much of yourself, your experience, or your ideas, then at that point, I think that's really where you get into that just copying realm.
One of my favorite quotes is the Marie Antoinette one. And after watching Napoleon recently and seeing Marie Antoinette lose her head in the first scene in that movie, and hopefully that is not a spoiler
I think
thing.
we all know that happened, right?
We all know it happened, and it's a good way to start the movie. But Marie Antoinette quote: "There is nothing new except what has been forgotten."
That's good. I like that. That's really good.
And there's another one on top of it, which is a Newton quote, which is "I see as far as I see because I stand on the shoulders of giants." And he stole that from some Italian dude way, 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 way back. So, as Jacqueline Nicholson shared with me recently, there's also a biblical verse that hits on the same piece. So, your perspective, the thing I heard Will say there, and I want to reinforce it, is that your perspective and what you bring to it is what is unique. And as long as you own it, you will continue to create unique things. It's when you try to be somebody else that you're setting yourself up on the wrong path for that kind of creativity, I think. What do you think?
I think that's very that you nailed it, mate. Good summarization there. But yeah, I think and I think this is what's really interesting as well is because your perspectives are formed by a lot of experiences of your own as well. So I think that's where you can look for things as well. It's like, can I apply this to something that I've actually done before? This is get into the realm of imposter syndrome, I suppose. But I will not talk about enterprise sales because the biggest deal I ever closed was like a one-off 120K, right? So if I come out there and I start creating content about how to sell as an enterprise seller, then it can't have possibly come from me. It must have come from someone else. So I'm not bringing my own perspective to that. I'm combining other people's perspectives. And that point, I'm curating, and I should be giving some kind of credit, I think. Um, if I can say, oh, this one time a customer came to me and they said, hey, Will, we want a demo. We want a proposal. We want your best price. We've talked to your competitor. They give us this price. And I said, oh, that's interesting. How long have you been chatting to them for? And they're like, a couple of months. I'm like, okay, so you come to me a couple of months later. I'm curious, does that company do what you're looking for it to do? And they said, yeah, it does. I'm like, oh, interesting. Because what you've told me is you've got a very good offer from them. I've never heard a deal so good. In fact, I've never heard an offer so low in this space before. And you're also telling me that their product does everything you need to do. What stopped you from moving forward with them? That's a reversal. That's a reverse psychology technique, often taught in it's taught in a few different sales methodologies, but the classic Sandler that'd be a negative reverse. I'm telling that as a story. And by the way, I hadn't consumed any Sandler training at that point, and I still haven't. But I'd been taught that technique by someone who had, and I didn't know it was Sandler until I read, I think it was like one of his books or one of the Sandler training books, like Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar or something like that. I didn't know I was using Sandler technique, but I was using my experience of what someone else had taught me. So I'm not, if I use that experience and try to teach folks how they can do a similar thing, would you say I am plagiarizing Sandler despite the fact I never had any training or read any of his books before that? I'm not sure you could because it's my experience. It's something that I did. It's a technique, but I've applied it in my own way as well. So yeah, that's why I do feel that I really want to avoid going into realms of places where I haven't done things before. Another one, like if I start talking about how to hire salespeople, I can only give that perspective from that of a candidate because I've never hired a salesperson before. So I'm not going to talk about it because I'd feel like an imposter. I'd be pretending to be something I'm not. Therefore, I'd be unfulfilled, and again, probably that plagiarizing realm, like you summarized.
Why do people fall into the trap of trying to do that? And when I say trying to do that, why do people fall into the trap of trying to present themselves as an expert in something that they don't have experience in?
I don't know. I haven't asked myself that same question before. I feel like there's probably maybe it's their own imposter syndrome speaking, and maybe they feel like they should know it, or they've run out of ideas themselves, or maybe it's more greed driven and they've got something to sell, and there's an ulterior motive there that isn't as good. So they feel like if they talk about those things, then they will get something that they don't have right now, like money, customers, fame. So I can only imagine that's the driver behind it.
What energy do you get from creating?
I get immense satisfaction from almost every part of it. And this I think is why I've stuck with it is because I enjoy it. And why I started in the first place. I didn't start creating content to go and do get where I am here today. I wish I could tell you I was that intentional, but heck, I'm just kind of flailing my way through my life right now, and it's just going real well. But yeah, I started creating content as like a thing to do when I wasn't working, and then it became my work. And there is something very satisfying about taking an idea and seeing it creating something from scratch. In a very similar way, I like to do some woodworking in my spare time, taking something that didn't exist and producing something new. There is immense satisfaction in that, especially for my brain, where a lot of my life I probably was starting a lot of stuff and never finishing it. So come from the point where I go, I know I want to make that, and then I might create a little bit of a flow or a script or something like that, and then I go ahead and film it, and then I go ahead and edit it, and then I go ahead and put it out, and then people say nice things about it. That feels good, of course, but it shouldn't be the reason why I'm doing it as well.
So, for someone like me who is fundamentally opposed to scripting, like fundamentally opposed to scripting, both in the context of the way that we go to market and when we sell, like these, here's your demo script. Like, that it is, to me, it's so unnatural. How can someone like me overcome their challenges with scripting when I know mentally or technically there's value in doing it? You'll be more succinct in the way that you communicate. And yes, there are professional actors who know how to use voice inflection and eye contact and all of the motions and all of those other things. But I think, well, if I'm doing that, if I'm manufacturing it, then I'm not really being myself. So how do I overcome this challenge of scripting, given that the most common feedback I get is, dude, you need to script more. Right? I need to
I,
script it
I
all.
used to hate the idea of scripting. Like, so I would never script. And so I would hit record on a camera and I would speak to it for a little bit and then I would stop hitting record. And what I found was, yes, a lot of that energy and that tonality was there because it was coming from somewhere of belief and it was coming straight from here to there, you know? However, the flow of that content didn't lend itself to a few things. Number one, it wasn't as concise as it could be. People have a tendency to waffle even when they're speaking about things that they're extremely proficient in. And just there's things like that that you can remove with scripting. But also, what I found when I started to use scripts, and I don't always use them, it can really depend on how I'm feeling that day, is that instead of talking for 40 minutes, I would talk for 10 minutes. And then I would only have 10 minutes of footage to edit rather than 40 minutes of footage to edit. And when I was editing that, I knew what the end result would look like. Whereas when I was editing the 40 minutes, I wouldn't know until I was done. So it was helping me be more intentional about content creation, reducing the lift on my end for both editing and presenting, and the amount of space I have in my SD card. So if it was me like figuring out, okay, if I know the goal is to create a video about cold emailing,
Yeah.
let's just start with that, right? What do I want to say? Getting that out there and knowing that I'm not missing anything was good to do up front. So I knew I was getting a more comprehensive video out of it. Now, what
Right.
that then enabled me to do was then go to a iced over lake and jump in and read the first line of the script. And then I went to a train track and read the second line of the script. And then I also read line 8 of the script and then line 14 of the script. And then I went to a ski hill and I read line three, and then I could cut them all together to create this visually interesting experience that follows content best practices, but I also know is super comprehensive and achieves the goal that I was trying to achieve with that video, which is watch this video, you'll know how to cold email. If I had just tried to do that here, or if I'd just gone to Ice Lake and started waffling and then went to another place and started doing that, I feel like I would have missed something, or I feel like I would have made my life a lot harder when it came to actually trying to put that together and deciding which was going to achieve the goal that I set out, which was to create a really great video that was engaging and gave a ton of value for anyone who was trying to send a cold email.
I really love the focus on, and you've used the word a couple of different times over the conversation, intent, intention, intentionally, acting with intention, operating with intention. There's a lot of focus on intention and the alignment with the specific goal, knowing what the goal is so that you can be intentional about it. Very, very powerful stuff. How'd you learn the editing skills that you have? Like when you talk about editing, all I think of is, okay, I remove some things or I stitch some things together or I put some intro music on the top of it.
Hmm.
Where did this appreciation for editing from for you?
Originally, when I started creating content, I was making content on TikTok and I was doing what we just described. I was hitting play, saying what I wanted to say, and stopping. And someone commented on saying, like, yo, you should cut your videos more because they could be way faster and way better if you did. So then I opened up an editor, and it was an editor that I was recommended by a YouTuber that I watched a lot. It was like a sponsor of their YouTube video and it was free. So I opened it up and then I clicked around a few buttons and I saw, oh, this is way better. And then it came down to like, that was quite easy because it's fairly intuitive and I kind of understand what I'm trying to do, cut things out, delete them, move them around a little bit. And then it came down to the fact that it was like I saw things, like I mentioned earlier, I was consuming and I was like, oh, I should do that. And then I had to go and learn that skill. So then I would go on YouTube, watch a thing, and I'm like, okay, so if I want to have captions that pop up like that, how do I do that? Or if I want to add a transition, how do I do that? Or if I want to put text behind me where I'm sat now, but in front of that wall, so it looks like it's kind of in the room with me. How do I do that? So I watch a YouTube video and then I learn, and then the second time I do it, I might have to watch the YouTube video again, but the third time, you know it at that point, right? So it was a mix. It was both feedback from people. That was originally what made me think, oh, I should be cutting these up a little bit more because at that point I wasn't doing the intentional consumption and thinking about how I could do better. That triggered me to then go and seek out new ways to do things. And since then, it's just been, oh, I don't know how to do it yet. I'll go learn it. Now, mind you, editing is something that I enjoy, but it's probably the most time consuming thing I do. And I've started to outsource that now because, and this is where scripting comes in again, because I can hand over a script with all the footage and say, hey, at this point, add this transition, at this point, show this graphic, whatever it may be. So it helps a lot of that creative process. But the point is, if I edit my own videos, I become the world's best paid video editor at this point. So it doesn't make sense for me to do it anymore as much. I'll still do things if it's quick, but if it's a full 10-minute video, me doing that's going to take me 2 days. 2 days, 8 hours a day, 16 hours. I'm not going to tell you how much I earn, but you realize that's more than any video editor ever gets paid, even in Hollywood, right? So then it's like, okay, is this something that I should still be doing myself and offloading that for someone else to do who is much cheaper?
Yeah, I like the the foundation that's set with doing the work, knowing what's good, what good looks like, how you want it to feel and be, and then being able to share that with somebody else so that they can go and do that. And then even I imagine there's another, well, is there a part of that where you also allow them to take some creative liberty with what they're
Yeah.
doing on their side?
They're capable of doing things that I don't know how to do that. I'd have to go watch a YouTube tutorial to do as well, right? So there's stuff I don't even know myself when I send over. There's things that they're going to think of that I haven't even thought of, and they're going to do, and I give them great freedom. Yeah, please, heck, do the stuff that I didn't think of, please. For gosh, if you think it's going to make it better, then please do. But yeah, that was a learning for me as well. Just not offloading work that isn't doesn't make sense. I think even wrote a book ages ago. I think it was like Fanatical Prospector by Jeb Blunt or something like that. In that, he says there was a rapper who was on one of his teams, and they came up to him and said, Jeb, I changed my own toilet over the weekend. I repiped my toilet or something like that, you know? So how long did that take you? He was like 6 hours, but I did it myself. And he was like, how much is a plumber to fix that? And he was like, $100. He's like, you just made, like $12 an hour
Right.
to to do your own toilet. So there's certain elements of that, but I do believe having fundamental skills in that before you do that is worthwhile. And I still find myself in a pickle every now and again where I want to turn something out today. I'm gonna have time to send it to an dentist, and being able to do it myself also enables me to actually still do it when I need to.
It's one of my biggest challenges is being providing enough space for people to do that kind of editing work. So now I'm leaning more and more on tools that can start to do that work for me. And there's a couple I use Camtasia and Audiate. So the stack to edit this podcast today are is Camtasia for the video, Audiate, which is integrated into Camtasia, and then I'll share clips using Opus clips. So those are three of my tools that I'm using. Are there tools that you've adopted to help move this stuff along?
Yeah, for sure. I haven't heard of any of those tools, by the way, Mike. So I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. But yeah, so I learned how to edit on DaVinci Resolve. That's my go-to editor now. Once you kind of learn how to edit sync on something, it's very hard to switch. All of them have very similar functionality. Premiere, Photoshop, Adobe has the best functionality, but is most expensive. However, DaVinci Resolve has similar functionality. It's just with the buttons are in different places and stuff like that, right? For for recording, sometimes I use Riverside to record with other people, podcast, those types of things. That's really good. It doesn't compress anything. I create a lot of humor content, so I use Mematic and a couple of trend analyzers as well. Mematic helps show me like trending memes and stuff like that. That was very helpful when I was running company pages, which can I don't use them as much anymore. I use Descript a lot as well. Descript's really helpful for podcast editing, I find. So that can remove all the gaps and the filler words that you use. So it rather than me having to scrub through and look for those like ums, ahs, and long pauses or breaths, I can just use that and it will automatically remove them, which I find pretty nifty. I'm probably forgetting a bunch more, but those are the ones that I think of immediately.
Are you optimistic about where technology is going?
I am. Yeah. I see new stuff that things can do and it makes me excited. Especially when it's saying in if when DaVinci Resolve receives an update, it's like it's a big deal to me now. So I'm like, oh, I can do that now. So for example, what I mentioned earlier, putting the text behind me, but in front of that wall, there's a thing called masking in there, and they developed an AI that automatically picks up what's a person and what's not. So I can immediately put anything behind who I am, or let's say I can select the sky in a photo and replace it with a brand new sky in less than 5 minutes. So that to me is like, whoa, that's so cool. So, and that's only possible because of AI and being able to learn what's sky, what's human, what's not. So that's really cool stuff. I'm less optimistic about stuff in the sales space because I think a lot of it is no longer enabling great work. I think a lot of it is replacing bad work with more bad work.
Any specific examples you'd like to share?
Anytime that you use artificial intelligence or something, I find what are we doing as sellers? What is the job we do?
The job for
Yeah,
me, it's problem solving at its core. That's
right.
it. It's not pitching a solution in the hope that someone has the problem. It's actually understanding the problem from the perspective of the customer so that you have earned the right to go in there and help them solve it, whether with your product or with somebody else's. And you can make those recommendations. So that's what sales is for me.
That's great to hear, Mike, because like that's it, right? It's being thoughtful, it's being able to connect the dots, being able to have a hypothesis, a point of view, and being able to help folks with their problems and lead with that and suggest, figure out and deduce that they might have this problem and why, and then ask the right questions. What I see a lot at the moment in sales, especially at the top of the funnel and the prospecting side of things, is a lot of companies developing tech that can replace a seller with AI. So it can write an email for you, or it can make your video, your mouth move on a video and make it look like you're saying someone's name. I think that at that point, you're trying basically using AI to pretend that you did the work for the customer, which is going against every single sales perspective I have. Every single one of my deep core values on how selling should be done is when you're using AI to replace the one part of sales that you should be doing, which is the thoughtful stuff. I don't think it's as bad when you're using AI to help you update the CRM because that's not the job. That's not the job. The job is to find, uncover, help people with their problems and give them solutions that are going to make a difference to their lives or their work or their business. But when we start trying to replace those things, then what are you trying to lose your job? Like, are you saying you're that bad at it that AI can do it? Because AI shouldn't be able to do it because it's not that simple. And if it's that simple, then it suggests if someone can get their work and send out a million emails using AI and it's getting them more results than they could on themselves, that would suggest that they probably didn't develop enough skills before they tried to replace their work. Because yes, AI can write a better email than a lot of sellers. But those sellers need a ton of training, and that's the problem, not the fact that AI should be writing the emails instead. So it's stuff like that. That's where I'm less hopeful about the direction of technology. Enablement of lazy behavior and removing what makes things so great. If I want to take it back to the creative process, I want to save myself time editing, for example, that masking thing that enables me to do something that I would not have been able to do before because I wouldn't have the time to invest to manually mask myself out of an image. But if you gave me an AI that could pretend to be me and present to camera and sound like me and look like me, what would be the point at that point? It's just crap, you know? If we wouldn't do that for a video that we're passionate about, we want to deliver the inflection, the value, and we know we've got a unique perspective on, why would we do that for sales? So similar things there.
It drives me absolutely insane when people attempt to leverage technology to manipulate folks. And they start this, whether it could be any kind of technology. The triggering thing for me is when I'm on a call with a founder or an executive or whomever, solution provider, and they start with, well, we're not here to sell you anything. Like, well, then why are we having this conversation? Like, and then you go through and you kind of unpack what's their perception of sales, and their perception of sales is convincing someone to do something, and then you have to really kind of reshape it. Well, then you get into these technologies like, well, that you're talking about, which can, like, you there's enough audio and video content of both of us out there in the marketplace that someone can recreate us. You can have
Yeah.
a artificial version, an avatar of us that's out there that will look really good. And the scary part for me is that lip dubbing piece, because you start to see it in certain contexts, like when they're localizing content for in different languages. And there's some benefit, but it could also be used horribly. And the example of where it could be used horribly are those Loom videos. And I should name, there's a name. There you go. Loom video that's out there
The
where
Loom offer that
someone,
functionality? I didn't realize that one. I know they have got a lot of competitors who do the AI stuff, but yeah, because I got one the other day and it went, "Hello, Will," and I was like, "This is an AI video, isn't it?" And it was like, "Would you like to send 1,000 personalized videos to your customers like this one?" I'm like, "I knew it was AI before you even said so. So no, I would not like to burn my entire network and destroy
right.
every piece of credibility I've ever had."
Well,
Uh,
and some people will show those ones where have you seen the ones where they put, I said Loom, but it's where they put like a whiteboard up in front and they have your name on it, but they never say your name. Like
yeah.
that was the 2 months ago or 8 months ago version of that,
Yeah.
where it's this faux personalized personalization. And is that really how you want to start a relationship? Like,
Yeah, trying to trick someone into thinking that you put in the effort. Like, why do you think people think salespeople are like trying to convince and manipulate and lying? Because of stuff like this. So what you're doing is literally when you use AI to personalize an email or make a video look like it's for someone else, all you are doing is starting the very first thing that you're doing with a customer off with trying to deceive them into thinking that you put in the effort for them. And you'll think about it in the wrong way as well, because oftentimes you writing my, if I just sent you a video about me and my product and write your name in a whiteboard, it wouldn't make any difference because it still doesn't understand the core fundamentals of why I'm reaching out in the first place, which a name on a whiteboard and a pitch doesn't explain. So and it probably will get there, but right now it isn't still. And even when it does, I don't think it'll be as good, and I don't think people should rely on as much. But it can't do that point there that requires the thought, that requires the human, the understanding of the customer at a real deep level to be replaced. So yeah, drives me insane.
good. We're aligned. So, but we both can be insane together, and misery loves company, and all of those other kinds of things. One of the things that you helped me with when I was sending some stuff in the background was this whole lighting thing. I went through this lighting exercise a couple of months ago, trying to figure out what in the heck do I do with all of the lighting. And now I'm at a point where I've got two newer stage lights that point at me, which is part of the reason why I have a suntan these days, is because these things just heat me up.
It's funny you
What
mentioned this because I'm horribly lit today. I'm very, very pasty looking, but I came back from I only just put my camera on for the first time since I came back from Florida. So I'm like, oh, I don't have time to change all the settings. But sorry, go ahead.
So, how does technology play into your stack and as you build up? Because one of the other things that you shared, I think this was right around the Christmas holiday or just beforehand, maybe between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but you bought a new lens and you didn't, based on what you shared, you didn't overpay for a lens. And I forget which lens it was. It was like this it was a little like focal lens. And so there are ways that you can do a lot of the things that you do where you're not overexpending or overspending on stuff. And
Hmm,
you can learn and you can test. So as people start to go on this creative journey,
hmm.
where would you start? What's the MVP version of being able to start creating and then starting to figure out some of the other things that you want to layer in to create that separation? Like even though your lighting you say is off a little bit right now, there's certainly shadows that exist because of the way that you've got your lighting set up. Go.
Yeah. So to be honest, I think this is something that people overthink about almost everything they try to start, at least.
Okay.
So, for example, if you ever been, you said you don't like golfing that much. Was that a story or is that a fact?
I absolutely love golfing. Like I
Okay.
golf
All right.
I golf more
All
than
right.
any
You gave
human
an example
should
earlier, right?
golf.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
but but when people start golfing, if they're gonna start, I'm not gonna go and tell them to go to the golf shop and buy the $600 club, right?
Right.
They don't know that they're good yet. They don't even know how to swing it properly. They're probably going to whack it on the ground and knock the head off it. Like all of those things, like they don't matter until they matter and you're actually really into it. Now, the good news is that almost every human being on the planet Earth right now seems to have one of these things, which is, in my case, an iPhone 14 Pro Max. But even if you have an iPhone 12, you're going to be able to film in 4K on your camera, on your phone. So you don't need to go out and get this stuff, but you start to grow an appreciation. And this comes from watching other people as well. Like I mentioned, again, that intentional consumption. If someone watches my video, they're like, oh, he looks good. They DM me and go, what camera are you using? You sent me a DM. What lighting setup should I have? I want to look like you. And that there's something that comes with that. Um, because I do believe that at a certain point in a journey of doing any skill, there is a degree of quality that you start to have a respect for. And in this realm of creating content, quality does sometimes equal authority in some ways as well. I've actually people ask me this question so much that I literally right before this I uploaded a video to YouTube. It's not done yet. It's still uploading, but it's basically just like here's the camera and lens I use and the lights and how I have them and the microphone I'm using right now and the one I used beforehand and what I use when I'm filming outside and stuff like that. Because so many people ask me about that when they see the content, like they see I've got like a blurry background and I'm quite sharp. And they're like, how do I do that? So I figured I may as well just make a video if people are asking that question. It tells me there's demand there for that video, and I can just send them that instead of having to try and tell them about lenses and stuff. Um,
You are quite sharp, and I do want to look like you.
Mike, you don't want to be this pasty, mate, honestly.
Well, absolutely awesome conversation. We've talked a lot about kind of the creative process and your process and your journey as you've kind of gone through it and some of the insecurities as you've worked through in individual pieces of it, both in the combination of creating and curating and why you wouldn't create in certain areas. Why why should people create more? Or why get into creating?
I think everyone's gonna have a different reason for this. I'm not gonna say this is why you, Mike, or anyone who ever listens to this should create. You have to find that yourself. For me, as I said, I started creating because it was fun. I continued creating because it was fun, and I also continued creating even more and took on as a career because then it started to pay me. So that became a different thing. So there are impacts they can have, but I find a lot of people ask me, "Hey, I want to do what you do. I want to create because I want the impact of people starting to pay me for it." And I think that is a recipe for disaster in some cases. Because if you're not having fun along the way, then it just stops being fun. It stops helping you be good. And the value of the content drops down as well because you're just not into it. For a brand, it's a little bit different. right? So for a one of the many brands I've worked for now, Vidyard and Lavender, as a couple of examples, it's part of growing awareness of your product, your service, making people know you, giving them value in some form or another, whether that's making them laugh or helping them do their job better, will only grow affiliation so that when they begin looking for something like yours, or it might even be such good content that initiates them to realize a problem they didn't know they had, they come to you first and you're authority to them, which only helps you more likely to close that sale. There's also a middle ground, I'll leave you with this, which I don't see many brands leveraging, which is there's some that what I'm describing to you with content is just marketing, right? It's building a brand, it's getting people aware of your product service, and they might come to you when they're ready. But there's a lot of people who you've built awareness with who haven't come to you and won't come to you necessarily. When you combine those people there who might be engaging with your content, who might be following your company, that might be following one of your leaders or yourself, and you combine that with outbound skills. So when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about giving someone a call or dropping them an email or sending them a DM saying, "Hey, I thought this might be a problem for you because I saw this, or I noticed it looks like this is a thing. I thought this might be a problem with you." And they've already built that brand awareness with you. The replies and the engagement of those conversations will go like that. If I cold called someone who knows of me right now on LinkedIn, who never takes cold calls, but they recognize my name, Will Aitken, they're much more likely to have a conversation with me. And I think that's a sweet spot. A lot of folks do miss out as well. So that's the why for a company. The why for an individual is really has to make you feel good.
Yeah. Do things, do things that align with your goals, operate with intention, do things that bring you energy, and understand what the job to be done is of the thing that you're delivering. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. It has been fabulous.
If you know of someone, actually, first, take that out. Well, where can people find out more about what you're working on? Where would you like to send people? I can't imagine there's anybody out there that doesn't know who the Will Aitken is, but for
Mm.
those who don't, where would you like to send them? Where can they connect up with you directly?
LinkedIn's probably the best spot. The inbox is a bit of a mess right now. I keep missing stuff and feeling horrible about it because people are thoughtful enough to message me nice stuff that was clearly for me and I ignore them. So you can also just hit me up in the comment sections of my YouTube channel as well, because I always see those. There's not enough of them for me quite yet for my personal YouTube channel for me to miss those. So that's a good place as well.
All right, we'll include links in the show notes. If you know of somebody who would enjoy this conversation, is working on creating content and needs that nudge to move them forward, share this episode with them and let Will and I know both through the comments on YouTube and in the comments on LinkedIn. Sales is a thinking process, business is a thinking process, life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?